This is now being recorded. All right, so welcome everyone to the Theatre Europa pre-Congress keynote presentation. It's something that we started at the last Theatre Europa Congress, where we had a first keynote presentation before anyone arrived at the location. It's a little bit of an intellectual warm-up, you know, that we all already get into the topic, we get into the theme, we get into the space of, all right, I'm soon going to be learning a lot in a very short amount of time. So we warm up slowly and we build it up from there. Our keynote presenter today is Nadine Lamouri-Bajja. She is an intercultural psychologist based in Strasbourg in France. But before I give her the word, I wanted to give the word also to the president of Theatre Europa, Papa Balla, to kind of officially open the learning period of the Theatre Europa Congress 2024. Papa, a few words.
Thank you so much, Pasha. I just maybe want to say a couple of words because you are the chair. I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for your hard work, as well for all the committee steering and the program committee. I just want to say good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of the Theatre Europa Board of Directors, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the Congress, to the pre-Congress launch of Theatre Congress 2024. As we gather here today, we are excited to set the stage of our upcoming Congress themed systems, the ecosystems of intellectualism, to be held from June 1st to 8th in the beautiful city of Lille, France. Today marks the beginning of our journey toward deepening our understanding and enhancing our skill in the rich and complex field of interculturalism. Over the next few days, we will explore the intricate systems that make up our intercultural world, preparing ourselves for the comprehensive discussion and innovative exploration scheduled for June. The pre-Congress launch is designed to give you a taste of what you expect, as well as to offer an opportunity to begin networking, sharing ideas, and setting collaborative goals with your fellow attendees. Our agenda is packed with insightful presentation, interactive session, and engaging discussion, all aimed to enriching our professional and personal engagement in intercultural context. Thank you for joining us today. Your presence and participation are what make our community vibrant and our effort impactful. We are delighted to have you with us and look forward to an inspiring launch and successful Congress in June. Let's make this pre-Congress launch a fruitful and memorable experience. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you very much, Papa. And today is also the Global Diversity Day. So it's a beautiful day to start our thinking and learning around topics that have to do with that. And with that, I will do us all a favor and shut up and give the word over to Nadine so that she can take over from here. Nadine, please.
Taking over. Thank you very much, Bastian. Thank you very much for Theatre Europe for having me and for trusting me to do this pre-note conference. So as Bastian said, I'm Nadine Lyamouri-Bajja. I'm based in a little village close to Strasbourg right now in my office. And I'm pretty fascinated to see 41 people who signed up to join this conference. For some, it's morning. For others, it's maybe even evening or later day. And some of us are in the same time zone. And I'm fascinated once again by the fact that my heart is actually beating a bit, quicker and stronger than in normal times. And that after over 20 years of working on that topic, I can still get that little adrenaline kick when I'm asked to talk about something that is by now very much part of my daily life. But I think the day I stop having that, I probably will stop working like that as well. And I love the fact that there's always so much surprise when you actually do a speech for a conference. Surprised by who is coming, who are, the faces I can start seeing on the screen. Are people smiling or are they not? Do I know somebody? Who is moderating? What did I have for breakfast today that maybe makes a difference? Did I, what did I do just before that session? And what am I going to do just after? Do I know Theatre Europe well or do I not? All of these things that make a difference in what I will talk about, because maybe I had a nice conversation with someone just yesterday that will flow into what I'll be telling you today, etc. So I love this fact that it's never a preconceived setup topic, but that it's always a co-construction and that something new comes up of it again and again, which is also why you will see that I do have a PowerPoint presentation, which is based almost exclusively of pictures, no text, because that gives me a lot of freedom to talk about whatever comes up to me when I see the pictures. But also because I just like to have first impressions and construct on it. So I hope I'm happy to share the presentation, but you'll see that the recording will probably be far more filled with content than the actual images. I would like to start by asking you a little question, and maybe we can write in the chat because there's quite a few of us here. I'd like to know, what made you come here today, or who forced you to come here today, or in other words, my question would be, let's suppose that we have spent these hour and a half together thinking and digging into systems complexity and how to dance with zombies. And let's suppose that this hour and a half has been really, really useful, inspiring, and enriching for you. What is different at 5:30 if this has been a good idea to come and join? What will you feel differently? What will you do differently? What will be different in you in an hour and a half if this pre-note conference has been useful and enriching? And I'd love to just see a little bit of what you're writing in the chat about. How do you notice if it has been inspiring? Thank you, Bastian. New ideas, new metaphors, new perspectives. What else? It's also okay if you just want to say something, that's fine. Curiosity, start networking, great. Okay, know about other perspectives. Mentally energized, I love that. Yeah, let's do that. Enthusiastic, energized, get an idea of the journey. See who's coming to Lille. Yeah, that's a good strategy. System, important scope. More energized, empowered as a therapist. New insights, online networking ideas. Okay. Yay. Curiosity, Vorfreude. Yes, I like that. New approaches, learn more. Food for thought. Faces on the theater family. Great. Thank you so much for this. Okay. Learn more about everything. Oh, that's a good start. Okay, good. Bastian, I don't know how you want to do this. If I just keep talking until the end and then we have sets of questions, or if you just want to have moments where I pause and then we check if there's something coming up. I leave that up to you. For me, both is fine on how
I
we
think
want
if there are natural pauses, we can take them, but I also wouldn't want to miss anything or what comes after. So if anyone has a question to Nadine, they can already put them into the chat box and I will take note of them and collect them so that we can, when the time is ripe, ask them to you. And you can send them either in the public chat or to me directly, and then everything will be good.
Right. Okay, so I will start sharing my screen then. Here we go. Can you see it? Yes. Okay. So, system thinking and complexity, learning to dance with the zombies. I will say a little more about the title later on. I'll leave it for now with this part, but we will definitely get to it. And I'll start with something that maybe some of you know. I'm thinking of the German speakers, maybe some of you have that in your background memory. It's a book, a German book called Das kleine Ich bin ich. The little I am me, or I am myself. And I grew up with that little book. So when I was a little girl, maybe I was 5 or 6 or something like that, I got that little book from my mum. She was reading it to me a lot, and we even have the little thing made. And the story of the little Ich bin ich is that this little creature actually looks for its identity and walks around going to different animals and saying, hey, I think I could be a horse, and asking the horses, do you think I'm a horse? Look, I've got my tail that looks quite like a horse tail. And the horse says, oh, no, definitely you're not a horse. I'm sorry, but you've got, apart from the tail, nothing looks like a horse. So the little Ich bin ich goes around and goes to see the elephants and say, hi, elephants. Look, I've got ears that maybe could be a bit like yours. Could it be I'm an elephant? And the elephant said, there's no way you're an elephant. And it goes on, and the little Ich bin ich is getting more and more desperate about not finding where it belongs and what it actually is. And then there's this aha moment at the end of the book where it says, I know, I am myself. Hey, that's what I am. And the funny part about this is that my mum got me this book thinking that I grew up in a very interculturally mixed family background, and that it was probably going to make me feel good to see that it was okay to not keep looking, but just be myself. And from the perspective of a little 6-year-old girl, I thought that was the most obvious thing in the world. I didn't really get what was so fantastic about this message, because hey, yes, of course I'm myself. Who else would I be? And it's in growing up amongst adults that these categories started, the problematics of having to define who I was, or where I fitted, or where I didn't fit, or what was part of me or what wasn't part of me, was something that I realized quickly other people needed. Putting you into boxes was something that apparently was really important to other people. So as if I had, gotten into the world thinking, of course I'm myself, and less and less and less was there space for you, for being unique, and more space. But are you more this, or are you more that? Or are you, are you more like this, or are you more like that? So taking it from a perspective where it's maybe not the children who have to learn about the I am myself, but it's something that they unlearn, and that maybe we have to relearn in growing up. So I thought I start from there, and maybe this is part of what made me become later on, first of all, so interested in psychology and understanding complexity of human beings. Then intercultural psychologist, because that dimension was very natural to me. And then thinking later on, there's something about working with individuals that is not enough. Individuals are denatured. Individuals are part of communities. Individuals are part of systems. And this is where I actually got into becoming a systemic therapist. Now, systems are a very trendy word. We love putting systems into everything. I don't know. So in some countries more than others. France is still very new with system work. I think, for example, Germany is far more advanced. It's been a while. But we talk about systemic things without always understanding what it means. And I like images. I'm someone who learns a lot with images. And the image that for me is the most understandable for what a system is the image of I think in English you say a mobile on top of baby beds. Little penguins, little dolphins, little whatever you have. Yeah. We say that each and every one of us has their mobile. And we are part of many, many different systems. So we have an original family system with the members of the family, which by itself already needs a definition, who is part and who is not. We have social systems, maybe different groups of friends. Maybe they mingle, maybe they don't, and we're part of those. We have a current family system that maybe is a different one from the original family system. We have professional systems, our teams at work, or the team we've been working on to organize the theater conference, for example, etc. We have organic systems, our body. Our organs don't do what they want, they are linked. And if one organ is dysfunctional, then the others are trying to reorganize, to cope, to make the body function somehow. All of this is us. But we are not just free electrons. We handle, we adapt, we disadapt, we readapt in function of the others and within those different systems. And in regards to what is expected, but also to the positions that are free, that can be taken, etc. And that means systems are perpetually on the move. There's not such thing as a fixed system. Systems move. Now, when I work as a therapist, very often people come to see me and say, you know, I'm actually not the problem. The problem is my husband, but he doesn't want to consult. That's a classic. Okay. And then we say, okay, let's look at the couple system. The fact that you are here and you are going to move, that will make the couple move, that will make the system move. And if it moves here, very often, it starts moving here and here and here. And I always found that from the very beginning a super energizing or optimistic view, because I thought, oh, great, I don't need to wait for the macro system to move from above. We can move in our little systems. We can move in our society. We can move in our family. We can move with our group of friends. We can move in our activism NGO. And if it moves strongly here, it will have an impact here and here and there. And this is how the systemic thought is constructed. That also means that we need to get away. I don't work at all with diagnosis, because diagnosis, in a way, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying a human being is always much more than a category. Categories help us to organize, but categories also get us stuck into certain things. And when someone comes to see me and says, hi, you know, this is the first session, I am bipolar, or I'm depressive, or I always say, okay, great. I'm really interested to find out what else you are. Let's see what else you are. Who's the human being behind? What are your resources? What are your passions? What are your systems? Who are you in the different systems? And to go beyond those categories. Which is not an invitation we get in simplifying. It's much more simple to actually have boxes, to check where the boxes are, and to focus on those. And of course, our mental system needs boxes to have some kind of orientation. But my invitation to you today and to us commonly is to actually get out of the boxes, or to see the in-betweenness of spaces, which I think intercultural learning is a lot about. It's not about the actual individuals that go into, it's about what happens in between. What happens in between systems, in between human beings. And I'm going to talk a lot about someone who inspired the systemic thinking a lot, who is called Gregory Bateson, and I will also Nora Bateson. But I really like how Gregory Bateson, who didn't like to be defined by a particular job. So if you say he was an anthropologist, that is only one little part of what he was, because he was also a biologist and he was also a therapist and he was many, many things. And Gregory Bateson has this nice way of saying that in a family therapy session, he would sit there listening to the different family members, and he would start by listening to the mother explaining the problem, and he'd sit there going, oh my God, no wonder this kid has a problem. That mother's really creating the problem in that system. And then the mother would finish, and then the father would start talking, and Gregory would think, oh gosh, oh no, actually it's the father. Oh, that is really a dysfunctional father. That's where the problem is. And then the kid would start talking, and he said, oh, maybe it's the kid. And eventually he said the round only finished when he was able to say, what about me in that family therapy system? Me as a therapist, maybe I'm the one who's creating something here, until he could realize it wasn't about the individuals. It was about the composition. It was the within that system that was creating something symptomatic that needed change. So what it needs is changing views, changing perspectives. I saw a lot of this in your expectations, and looking at symptoms as a way for systems to express the need for change. And I think that means the only fact of saying we are systemic is actually wrong, because that would be something very absolute. And if I wanted, of course, I make it shorter. I'm not going to start writing on my visit cards, I'm a little bit more systemic, because that would be very disorienting. But in a way, we can say maybe you are, as part of CETA Europe, maybe we are trying to be a little bit more intercultural than other people are. But from the moment we make it a category, we are the intercultural ones. It becomes an algorithm of 0 and 1. You are or you're not. You're systemic, you are or you're not. And it's probably at the time we start doing this that we're not systemic at all anymore, because it's about something that is in perpetual movement and questioning and looking into the in-betweenness. Can you follow me so far? Yes? Okay, great. I would actually love to see a few more of your faces, because that wouldn't make me feel so lonely on this side. Let me see if I can make that happen. Good. Now, in the systemic approach, maybe this is going to be a bit surprising. We say there's 3 main resources that bring about change in societies and in human beings and in any system. The first resource is not knowing. It's not something we've learned, at least not in the French school system. They don't teach you that not knowing is a resource. Not knowing in the sense of, if I don't know, I question. And if I don't know, I'm ready to find out. And there's all these little sentences that we have in daily talks when we talk about someone and we say, I know him by heart, about a partner or about a sibling. I know all about it. I can answer questions. That is a limitation of the other person. So from the moment I think I know the other, that means I finished learning. And not knowing as a resource means I'm questioning again and again and again. It's tiring, but it seems like it's a resource. The second one is confusion. Being confused as a sometimes very uncomfortable state. But being confused also means my foundations are being moved. I'm changing perspective. Confusion means I'm not in the certainty of what I had so far. I'm looking at things differently. I need to understand, so I'm going to look for solutions, for other answers. And the third one is feeling helpless. Feeling helpless as I need to go and ask for relationship, for answers, for cooperation. So not knowing is a very cognitive resource. Being confused is a very emotional resource. And helplessness is, in French, we would use disarmed, being disarmed rather than helpless, not knowing what to do. And what one of the big systemic thinkers, Varga Kibet, says is, only in those stages will you be ready to really get out of your perspective so far and to see the world in a different shape. And only then can change actually happen. So it seems that we sometimes go through very uncomfortable stages and that these can bring about change. I'm not saying we have to be in those all the time because that wouldn't be very comfortable, but maybe in the intercultural field, we have a lot to relearn from this, from the moment on that we start making pre concepts of I know how this culture functions. I know how intercultural learning functions. I know what it's like. Maybe we don't anymore. Maybe this is when we actually lose our openness of tell me about you. Who are you? Not the representation of your culture, not the representation of your age, not the representation of the place you live, but you. And that requires a getting out of all the boxes that open up when we meet a human being. Yeah. Oh, the person is white, the person is young, the person is, that is going to give me the first boxes. And then, am I then able to dig into it and tell me about who you are? That's what I want to know. Going further and back into the mobile. That also makes our life quite difficult because it means there is many versions of ourselves. We are different persons in different systems and we have different roles. I'm now here talking to you as speaker. I'm also here as a colleague because I was invited by my dear colleague. After this, I'm going to have a few more consultations, so I'll be a therapist. And tonight I'll come home and I'll be a mummy and I'll be a partner. And maybe I'll see my neighbor before I go home and I'll be a neighbor. And maybe I'll send a message to my sister and I'll check how my mum is, etc. And all these different roles, they are easy to manage when they're separated. Yeah, when I can be a therapist from 9 to 5 and then a mother from, but very often that's not how life functions. And we get into all these different roles. And then my best friend asks me something because she's having a really hard relationship with her partner at the moment. And I have to check, oh, who is she asking? You know, is she asking me from the hat of a friend or from the hat of a woman and get very angry about some topics? Or is it the hat of the therapist? Because I might have one or two tools on what she could do. And this is probably why family dinners, you know, big dinners that are linked to festivities and Thanksgiving, Christmas, Yom Kippur, Eid, whatever you can have as big celebrations around the table can be so complex, and why a lot of people need a therapy session after those moments, because we're all there with so many of us. So if you have 10 actual physical people around the table, you have those 10, but in all those different roles at the same time. And I'm sitting there as a partner and as a mother and as a daughter and as a niece and as a friend and maybe as a host. And sometimes there's such a complexity of what is expected from me and what I think I should be, and who I think I should behave as, and how sensitive I'm going to be to certain topics rather than to others, because in that particular context, maybe that's a taboo topic. And here we don't talk about it. And I know that part of the family is super conservative. Is that going to be okay with that part of the family that is far more open up, etc.? A lot of complexity in human beings getting together with an emotional aspect on top of it. We don't want to hurt. We don't want to be excluded. We want to be part of the system. We have a lot of loyalty, etc. This happens in any gathering amongst human beings with more or less distance. When you go to a conference, you might meet some friends again that you know. You might be there for the very first time. You want to give a good impression, but you also want to just hang out. You want to be the learner. Maybe you want to be the one who can also contribute something, etc. And sometimes it's just nice to wonder, who am I in all this? And how can I just be me and meet the other in all the otherness? I move on, unless there's questions. Bastian, anything in the chat? Nope.
Nope, just some comments, some people resonating with what you are saying, but no concrete questions yet.
Okay, good. Then, okay. I am now going to move to something that for me has been quite life-changing when we talk about complexity and system thinking, which is the work by Nora Bateson. Nora Bateson is an international filmmaker. She's a systemic thinker and researcher, and she happens to also be Gregory Bateson's daughter. I'm very careful to say it in that way, because very often she still gets presented in the first place as such. And there we are again in the simplification of who someone is. She is not just her father's daughter, but she also happens to be. And Nora Bateson has developed a concept, if it can be called such, a few years ago that she called the warm data labs. And the idea of the warm data is that it's something, of course, that is pretty much the opposite of cold data, but that was created in the context of big data. Nora was invited to a big meeting in San Francisco on Google, developing big data. And she's describing how she sat in front of a massive screen with little red dots. And the presenter was saying, isn't that fascinating how we can actually see real life migration happening on the screen? We can see refugees moving from A to B, and we can see all those dots moving on the screen. Wow. And Nora sat there being completely outraged and saying, but, what do I do with this? I want to know who this dot is. I want to know, what that person did before moving. I want to know how they made the decision whether to move or not. I want to know what they took with them. I want to know what they were doing before. I want to know how they are related with each other. I want to know what their favorite music is. I want to know what they cook. I want to know what their dreams are. I want to know about the human being behind the dot. And she started thinking, how do we do this? How do we recreate something that is about connection, that is about recreating link, humanity behind the big data? And she said, we have all these fabulous social masks that we're pretty good in wearing. And we more or less function in society with our social masks. And in the warm data, what she says is, I want to see what's behind the mask, behind the representation, behind the codes, behind the norms. I want to create something where we can have conversations not about topics, because then we're back into our roles of I'm an expert, I'm going to tell you about it, but conversations within topics. And the picture you see here is actually drawn on a piece of toilet paper, if I'm not mistaken, because Nora was sitting somewhere in 2012 and actually drawing all these ideas on a piece of paper. And all she had was toilet paper. And what she's drawing here, the dots you can see, the circles, are contexts. Contexts through which we look at our societies or at our problems. Some of these contexts could be politics, ecology, economics, law, family, spirituality and religion, etc. Education, employment. And what Nora says is, look, what is problematic with our vision of the world today is that we stay in our context and we feed the problematic context within. So she says, let's take the example of a school system. Education. Yeah, I think many of us, depending on where we come from, would have a lot to say about the challenges of our education systems. And what do we do when we want to change something in an education system? For example, we organize big education conferences. And who do we invite to education conferences? Education experts. And where are education experts coming from? From within the education context. So she says we're actually feeding the problematic system within, which means we're really limited in the solutions we can find. And this is where her drawing starts doing all these other lines and shapes. She says what we need is to recreate transcontextuality. In order to find solutions in an education system, what we need is to invite experts from ecology, from economics, from politics, from the family life, from all these different contexts, and actually learn with each other, from each other, get out of our bubbles, get out of our contexts. Remember that what us human beings are going through is probably something that other organic systems are going through as well. Maybe we can learn something from ecology. Maybe we can learn something from mushrooms. Maybe we can learn something from how other systems are solving some challenges that we are facing. So she says, if you take the example of a doctor, you know, the medical field, health, a doctor who is actually doing home visits gets to see so much more from a patient's context than a doctor who's receiving a patient in his office or her office. The doctor gets to see the atmosphere at home, whether the person is lonely or surrounded, whether it's warm in the household or cold, whether the person is rather living in poor conditions or has an okay social standard. If the person is listening to music, if the person is actually moving around, all of this is what Nora would consider warm data. That is not measurable. That is not going to be written in the doctor's report about the health of the patient. Hence, that does play a very important role in the situation of that person today. Are you still with me? Okay, yeah, a few thumbs up. Thank you. Good. I was saying this about
one first question if you want. Maybe that's a good moment, right? Yeah,
that's a good moment.
It's also connected to this point right now. It says from Lilian Leva, does it mean that we need to address challenges from several systems at the same time, exchanging views? Maybe Lilian can unmute herself and maybe provide more context to that contextual question about transcontextuality.
Yes, Lilian, that would be great if you tell me a bit more about your question.
Yes, it's about it's necessary to see reality and to see all the things, all the problems with different systems, and to know what is a new view.
Exactly. So what the Batesons are saying,
co-creating.
Exactly. Yeah. What the Batesons are saying is that what we need is to go outside of our context, and actually it's not in that context and in that one or in that one that we find the solutions, but it's actually in the mutual learning between the contexts. And that what Gregory Bateson calls an abductive process. He says whatever life experience we have is already a description of something we did just before. So if I'm going to a restaurant and I'm having a waitress or a waiter who is super unfriendly, of course, I'm in a context of a restaurant. I'm a client. I'm here to have a nice evening and maybe to have a nice drink and nice food, and I don't want to be yelled at or talked with in a bad way. That would be our little context where we're moving. But from the moment I can see that person as, oh, wow, that's a worker. What are his or her work conditions? How did he or she actually sleep last night? What were the clients like that came just before me? What happened to that person in her life today? What is my way of interacting right now? What would I like to be treated in a different way? And as soon as I can open up to all of this, something else can happen. That is not measurable, but not nameable either. I cannot say it's a strategy. I cannot say, oh, I'm going to do this and that, and then this and that will happen. It happens. So what Nora Bateson says is, indeed, when we're talking about intercultural issues, how do we actually look at it through the different contexts? How do we look at it? And you were saying, Lillian, through the different systems, it doesn't necessarily mean I need to invite my work system into my family system or vice versa, but at least the different contexts that we're in. Does that make sense? Does it answer your question?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Great. Okay. Any more questions? No.
At this moment, no. So I think we can continue with your journey there.
Okay, I'll go back to the presentation. What Nora did with this was to develop what she calls the warm data labs, and online she called it People Need People, PNPs. And it's an experimental gathering where she brings people together from different contexts, people who don't necessarily know each other, who are invited by different people, and who are going to spend a moment together having conversations. Warm conversations, in the sense that we're not interested in expertise. We're not interested in big speeches. We're interested in actual meeting, sharing something. So she has different tables, and each, well, there's not even tables, just chairs in little circles all around the room. And on each of them, there's a context written. So here you have ecology and health and science and law and economics. And she's going to start with one question, a very broad question, that is the question for the afternoon. For example, what is continuing in a changing world? Or what is being remembered? So a very broad question. And then people go and sit together and chat. So through the lens of ecology, what is continuing in a changing world? And whenever they're done here, so there's no facilitation whatsoever. We don't say, okay, time's up, you move, but people actually go around. And the fact that they've been here before and have been looking at it through the lens of health and have had conversations with people in a little tiny bit of something here, and then move to law, they will be having a completely other conversation in law because it is already abductively marked by what happened here. And everyone brings in those little bits of whatever they had. There is no process of we gather the content and we made a feedback presentation. There's nothing about we take notes. There's no production other than the in-betweenness of what happens. And the magic about this, and this part of the interrelationships, the interconnectivity, the transcontextuality, is that people who participate, so Nora trains a lot of warm data hosts. And what we do as hosts is that we organize warm data labs everywhere, different contexts. And what happens is something non-measurable about a very, very different quality of conversations. And it seems, and I'm going back to my mobile here, that the fact that here in this round of the warm data, this quality of conversation has taken place means that those people who participated in it go back to their systems and have different qualities of conversations because they do something different. And if it moves here, then the whole system moves. So in the beginning, Nora was radical about saying we're only having this in face-to-face. We had that conversation before. Do we have hybrid? And Nora said, no. We'll never have warm data labs online. That is just going to spoil the concept. And then COVID happened. And then we said, we need something. So she started creating what she called the people need people and having this in Zoom rooms where we moved around. By now, there's over 7,000 communities having warm data labs or organizing these types of events. Maybe one day we can do this with theater. That would be really interesting. What is fascinating about warm data is the intensity, the quality of the moment we share, and the non-productivity of something that happens that is non-measurable. That happens. And that brings a different level of information that seems to be really interesting for problem solving in everyday life afterwards. But you can imagine that this is not something you do to earn money, because who would you sell a product to that actually doesn't produce anything measurable or productable, or that, try and go to an institution and say, I want to organize a warm data lab. No, we're not going to have any feedback. No, we're not going to measure results. No, we're not going to actually do a report about this. It's just going to happen. But really, it's great. Yeah, that's not quite something you sell as a product. The other thing about these type of conversations is how fascinating it is to actually talk to people for a while without having any information about who they are. So in the warm data labs, we avoid the whole round of where are you from? What do you currently do? Because as soon as we do this, we invite the representation hat. I'm from and my job is ta-ta-ta, makes me immediately take the role of. And there you have conversations with people you don't know. Maybe someone was a prime minister. Maybe someone is your neighbor. Maybe, and you share a moment of life and then people move on. One participant in a warm data lab said to me last year, she was from Morocco, and she said to me, but okay, wow, cool, you're making concepts out of this. This is exactly what happens in Moroccan trains during Ramadan when we're sitting in a compartment. You get into the compartment when it's time to, how do you say it in English? Rupture du jeûne. Well, fast breaking, is that how you say it? Fast breaking time. Everyone is just opening up their boxes, sharing their apples, sharing their dates, in the compartment, and sharing a little moment of life, saying, oh, what happened to me today? I had this argument at work and I saw this. And whenever it's over, the person gets up, leaves, and they have shared this little moment of something that might be really remarkable in their lives. And that will probably influence the way they will go on with their lives afterwards, because this has happened. And I believe strongly that in this interconnectivity, which is also what you are doing in this type of conferences, change really happens. A deeply qualitative change that is maybe not measurable in what is actually going to be written on the flip charts, but in that in-betweenness. I'll make a little side note here. Bastien knew I would probably be doing this, but to talk about the way our systems are all constructed when it comes to justice systems. I'm just going to stop so I can see you. I had the big chance to be trained 2 years ago by a fantastic psychologist whose name is Simon Gassi-Birege. And Simon is a psychologist in Rwanda. And he used to be a psychologist in France and in Belgium, but he was working with individual patients, doing individual therapy work. And his big dream was to go to Canada and become a professor in a Canadian university. And the year that actually was made possible, the genocide happened in Rwanda. And Simon was in this big challenge of, what do I do? Do I actually go and respond to my personal dream, which is to go to Canada and pursue my career, or do I go back and try to help in my country? And he chose the second option. And when he arrived there, what he did was what he had learned to do here. He got a tiny little office. He sat down, he had a chair to receive patients, and he was waiting. And he just went around saying to people, I'm a therapist. If you need help, you can come for an individual consultation. Now, imagine the situation. Over 1 million people died, and it's an absolute, terrifying situation. And Simon is sitting there waiting to have individual therapy, as he's learned to do in his context here. And I think altogether over a month, he had 4 people coming saying, Dr. Gassi-Birege, this is really nice of you, but honestly, that's not going to change the way I deal with this situation. And so he thought, oh, I need to find a completely new way of doing this. And so what he did was to develop a whole new concept that was community mental health. And he said, I don't know. I've never been through this. We've never been through this. We need to do something. And so he started gathering people in the villages. He went around the villages and he gathered people in the football fields. And he said, okay, if you're ready to heal together, he never talked about trauma. He talked about healing together. He said, we're all wounded in very different ways. But if you're ready to heal together, I'm going to have those 6 workshops. So you have to agree to do the 6 workshops together. And on those 6 workshops, we're going to sit together and heal together and go through our pain together. But I want this to be an inter-community thing. Now, imagine the difficulty of being ready to heal together with someone who's probably been killing family members, who used to be maybe your neighbor. But he said, we can't heal separately because we're in a country where we have to live together. No, we can't all go. And they developed this concept. And he says, some people won't come and some people will never come. And some people maybe in 6 years will be ready. And some people want to do it now. That's okay. Time is a different concept. But let's try that. And so Simon developed this whole concept of community mental health, which is still ongoing today and has fabulous success. He's a practitioner, so he's never published anything about it, but he says he's going to do it in the next few years. He's 84 now and full of energy, and let's hope he produces that book about this fabulous concept. In the same way, what he says coming back to train us is, well, one of the challenges we have in the European societies now is that we treat problems individually. We treat persons who have been bullied and persons who bullied separately, but we don't have ways of healing together. And I'm not saying this is easy, and I'm not saying I know how to do this. I'm just thinking this is a really interesting question for us to, to ask ourselves. How can we do this? And I don't know if you're aware of the concept of restorative justice that is starting more and more in many countries to be developed. Exactly, spaces that restore. Restorative justice is something of that, saying when someone has been a victim of something and has really suffered, very often persons who have, been victims, they wait for the court to give a final statement that is going to recognize their status of victim. But very often what happens is that when this happens, they don't feel any better because the recognition has come from a neutral judge. It hasn't come from the person that actually created the pain. And so the healing can only partly happen. And restorative justice that is being developed, again, that was developed a lot on the basis of gachachas in Rwanda and is now being developed in Belgium, in France, in different systems parallelly to the legal court system, is to say, let's try and bring people together. Let's try and get people to talk together. Maybe the victim cannot talk to the person who aggressed them, but maybe they can talk to someone who's been having the same behavior and who can create dialogue. So it doesn't have to be a one-to-one. And I think it's interesting. In Belgium, there is a big project about bringing parents of victims of terror attacks together with parents of youngsters who went to do jihad, and to have those parents healing together. Yeah. So again, it's not going to be the one by one, but to create something like that. Are there any ideas,
Yes,
comments?
there was one question here. One was, can you write here the name of the Rwandese psychologist? And then another question from Roberto, who said that most of their work involves people whose cultural matrix has been largely influenced by Confucian philosophy.
Yeah.
And I wondered whether our view of how systems manifest themselves could somehow be different from those cultural others.
Is this a written question, Bastian?
It
or
is
can I
a
hear
written
more
question.
about it? Yes.
Roberto, can you unmute
Yes.
yourself and give a little more context to this question?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
Nadine, thank you so much. This is wonderful. I think my question at the core comes from my experience with having a different relationship with emotion regulation and also introspection with individuals that have been socialized in a very different environment from the one that we are, myself has been. So the question is how the system thinking applies to those who are not used to introspecting, dealing with emotions, because it is very much a relational discussion, the one that we're having. So I wonder if you have any insights. It's a big question, I know, but I wonder if you have any insights about that.
I'm just going to check if I got your question correctly. So let me know, Roberto. But I think I hear what you say about the relation to emotions and the cultural aspects of this. However, I think what is pretty clear is that human beings are mammals, and that mammals cannot survive as individuals. We need others to survive. There's a lot of experiences of human beings living by themselves. They don't survive. So the expression of emotion, the way we introspect or don't introspect, the way we conceptualize emotion, the way we talk about emotion is probably something extremely cultural. The fact that human beings learn, human beings feel, human beings experience, and human beings influence each other, but not only between human beings, also with animals, also with plants, also with the air we breathe, also with, I think this is something universal that goes far beyond culture. But I don't know if this is partly answering your question.
Nadine, this is very helpful. I think based on just on my experience, because the expression of those emotions and the ability, I mean, really, it's the skill to introspect is so vastly different for some individuals. Sometimes I feel that the conversation is impaired when I try to introduce the topic that we are discussing on this webinar, which is, the system thinking, the relational. It's basically the degree of comfort in opening up to the other. So in the absence of this a disclosure, obviously the relationship is at a deficit level because I cannot obviously introspect for the other person. But I know it's a big question and I don't want to hijack the conversation, but I think you've been very helpful in just highlighting the basic primate need that we all have to interact. Thank you, Nadine. Yep.
And maybe this is also because what we're doing here is talking about systems. Also because, we're in a conference context. I'm talking mainly, and sometimes some of you are adding something and some of you are writing something, but I can also see facial expressions that are very useful to me, or I can see some nodding, or I can see some... So all of this is also about expression. That maybe is not going to be used in the same way. I think what is problematic is if we want to develop a concept that is about, let's talk about what happened. And I see this a lot in therapy, and I am when I work in intercultural context, I get very annoyed about the way we want to have one way of healing. And I think human beings have 1,000 ways of healings. And I see that therapy is only one tiny little possibility, and probably a very Western concept, especially individual therapy, as something we have developed to fill in something, and it works for some people and it so doesn't work for others. But when I work with a refugee kid who's coming, from example, for Guinea, I work a lot with unaccompanied minors. And when Suleiman comes to me and says, I was bewitched by my mother-in-law, who am I to question whether witchery exists or not, whether he was bewitched or wasn't, whether what he's living is linked to what we would call psychosis or any other thing? That is a terrible superiority of one cultural interpretation and one analysis or interpretation of what someone else is going through. We have concepts. Of course, we have concepts. And I'm not trained in how you get rid of bewitchery in Guinea. But what I'm trained in is something that would be similar for me. And I would ask, hey, what is it that you usually do to get rid of that? Can you tell me? And I never go into here we do and there you do, because that is already a generalization. We don't all do the same thing. When I work with unaccompanied minors, and we see that a big problem is the consumption of sugar, because they drink their tea. A lot of them come from places where you put a lot of sugar in the tea. I know that, having Moroccan origins myself, tea has to be super sweet. No, that's a fact. You put a lot of sugar in the tea. Now, when an educator comes and says, in France, we put 1 sugar in the tea, what kind of nonsense rule is that? Who has said, is that in the French Constitution? I don't think so. From the moment you make it a rule that is related to a cultural habit, that loses completely its sense, because of course not all French people put the same thing with their own, sugar. The result is that the kids stopped drinking tea, which wasn't really what was intended. But having a conversation about things that relate us. What about health? What about our relationship to sugar? What about what sugar does to me? What about how soothing sugar is? What about what else do I have that creates a similar feeling for me than sugar without being so unhealthy? What about memories that I have about drinking tea with other people and the feeling of community and sharing? What about the taste of the mint that is related to the sugar, and that the sugar makes the mint taste stronger, etc., etc.? That is interrelational. And that is a deep quality of discussion that goes far beyond the amount of sugar pieces we have in our tea. And that is maybe not going to be called a conceptual introspection exercise, but it happens. Just like it happens when we listen to a piece of music together. And maybe maybe we've never learned about notes and about instruments, but we can share something really strong together around that piece of music. And it's going to be introspection, because I'm going to feel something, and maybe I even taste something, and maybe suddenly I felt really emotional about something, or maybe I feel like dancing, or something happens in my body. So words are just one way amongst many, many others for us to be connected as human beings.
We have one more question.
Yep.
From Carlos Gonzalez. Who owns the concepts, the definitions, the frameworks, the models, the systems? Who owns the definitions of global cultural competencies? That was a question that just was added to that. So maybe we start with who owns the concepts, the definitions, the frameworks, the models, the systems?
Ooh, that is a big question. Definitely not me. Yes, that's a great question. Isn't it the same thing that my mother and I had a very heated conversation a week ago, and it was about beliefs and religion, and it was quite a heated conversation, as it can be when you talk about this for many persons. And she said to me, she asked me something about but do you believe? And I thought, that's a very intimate question, and that's as deep question as the one you just asked here. But she said something like, who is God? Who is God? I said, probably God is something very different for everyone. Do we need a common definition of what we call it? Can we just agree that we're talking about things without defining what it means? But when I say beautiful, I don't define either what it means. And it's surely a very different thing to me than it is to you. So maybe concepts belong to people who use them and transform them. And maybe from the moment, and this is interesting because we're going to move to Nora Bateson developing words. She invents words, which is something they do in her family. From the moment Nora has developed a word, exactly, combining, that's the one I want to get to. Yes. As soon as she develops a word and it's out there, it's not hers anymore. And we have to accept this. From the moment I have an idea and I share it with someone, it's not my idea anymore, because my idea is going to be told to someone else who's going to transform it and put in own experiences and own expression by telling it, and transform my story and transform my idea. And I think this is the case with concepts and definitions and frameworks. They never are. They are created somewhere. That would be my answer to that question for now, but just trying to get out of your difficult question.
Okay. Then we have overall 20 minutes left. I would like to,
yes.
Overall, until the end of this space and time that we have with each other. So within those 20 minutes, if you can kind of round out what you wanted to round out, but that we still have a few minutes in the end for one last or two last questions.
I'll do that. I'll be brave. See, my worry about my initial worry was once again not so realistic, was it?
Well,
okay, I'll move on. So I really, really would like to share with you this quote that comes from Tyson Yunkaporta. If you want to read something fabulous about system thinking, I can only recommend. So the book is called Sand Talk, How Indigenous Save. And quote, one of the many quotes that I really like is, he says, people today will mostly focus on the points of connection, the nodes of interest like stars in the sky. But the real understanding comes in spaces in between, in the relational forces that connect and move the points. The symbol highlights those interconnections and de-emphasizes the points. If you can see the relational forces connecting and moving elements of a system, rather than focusing on the elements themselves, then you're able to see a pattern outside of linear time. And then we can link the past and the future. So the idea that it's not so much you and me that are interesting. It's what happens between you and me when we meet, when we have a conversation, when we create something, a new reality that has never happened before and will never happen again. Because you and I will not be in the same shape, because time will be another one, because we will have done something different before and after, etc. Now let me get to the zombies. So at least you get an idea on why I chose this title. Zombies, chameleons, and human dignity. I want to tell you Trevor's story. This is another story from Nora Bateson's book. Trevor is her son. And what Nora says is that when Trevor was about 12 years old, he came home from school one day and he started talking about zombies, you know, emptying the dishwasher, talking about zombies. And, you know, Nora thought, oh, this is another one of those Netflix series that he's watching and, you know, just watching some of those things. And maybe before it was vampires and now it's zombies. But it kept going on through weeks. He would talk about zombies again and he'd say, hey, Mom, can we use this knife or this vegetable cutter in case zombies ever come to attack us? And again, she didn't pay attention until one night Trevor had a nightmare and came sweaty and crying into her room and said he had this nightmare about the zombies coming. And Nora says she did something completely unusual in her mother's role, which was not linked to a particular pedagogical approach, but rather to her deep tiredness in that moment. She said, usually in those moments, she would have said, honey, don't worry, zombies don't exist. Go back to bed, you'll be okay. But she was too tired to do this. So what she said was, you know what? We'll talk about it in the morning. And the we'll talk about it in the morning was a completely different approach to saying, I want to know what you're talking about. I want to enter your world and have a conversation. I want to hear you. I want to understand you. So in the morning, they had a chat. And what she said was, Trevor, what are zombies to you? Because to me, they are the kind of thriller Michael Jackson zombies, you know. What are zombies to you? And Trevor said, zombies are people who cannot think for themselves. They want you to be like them. And if you do what they say, your dignity, if you don't do what they say, no, if you do what they say, your dignity flies out of the window. I'm sure many of us can think of zombies around us. Trevor was facing a really difficult time at school at that moment. Nora was getting a lot of those emails about, you know, Trevor is having behavioral problems. Trevor is not disciplinating in school. Trevor is not listening. We need to talk about Trevor. Maybe Trevor could get some medicine to better cope with Norm, etc. And here comes his response to zombies are people who cannot think for themselves and who want us to be all the same and to behave in a certain way. But if we do, we lose our dignity. And Nora did something that I would like us also to take really with care, because it was one intervention in one particular situation, but I would say, whoa, don't make this as the general response. Trevor is an actor today. He's an adult man. He's an actor. And she said to him, Trevor, I'm going to offer you your first actor's job. I'm going to pay you to pretend a few hours a day that you're a zombie, just so they leave you alone and don't realize you're not one. It's playing a role, doing as if. But every night when you get home, you and I are going to check that we didn't become zombies. So doing as if. Now, I use that story a lot in my therapy session. And there's a part of me that thinks, of course I'm biased, because people who come to see me very often are people who are not in the norm, who don't fit the boxes, who don't behave accordingly, who, you know, who are scared of zombies. But there's a part of me that thinks, why are they the ones who need to play the role? Why do they need to try so hard to be like zombies? So in that story of Trevor, I find it a fabulous intervention. But in general, I also question very much, especially in the intercultural context, you know, how many people do we ask to pretend they're zombies, even if they are not and they don't want to be? And how tiring is it to have to do this all the time? So this whole questions, I also like the image of a chameleon, because I was always told this, you know, navigating between my Northern German culture and my Moroccan culture and growing up in the French culture with a Spanish nanny. I'm a super chameleon. I can adapt very easily to different contexts and different belief systems and different ways of functioning. But it's tiring to be a chameleon, because sometimes you lose the actual question of, what about me? And I remember one of those training courses where, you know, things often don't happen in the training course, but in the in-betweenness, when you go out for a drink afterwards. And we were having an evening with the other participants, and someone said, should we share food, or does everyone take their own plate? So far, so good. And then that person asks me, what about you, Nadine? Do you prefer to share your food, or do you prefer to eat your own? And my question, how silly was that? My question was, well, in my Moroccan family, we share food. And in my German family, each of us eats their own. And she says, yes, that's not what I asked you. What about you? And gosh, that was one of the hardest questions I ever got. And it took me a few years afterwards to think about it and to find an answer of my own. That was, how do I actually like to eat my food? Yeah. So the danger of the chameleon and the zombie, and how much do we actually need something called the norm to be able to live together? I don't have answers to these, but I think in the fields of work we are in, what brings us together also at CIETAR, these are very important questions to ask ourselves. Okay, I'm moving on. I'm gonna almost skip this, but I just want to say that microaggressions are something that go in the continuity of this, because microaggressions are just like mosquito bites. Once in a while, you get one of those silly remarks that nobody else is going to notice because you're probably just oversensitive. But when you get bitten again and again and again and again, you develop allergies and you just can't stand them anymore. And I actually have a problem with the fact that microaggressions are called micro, because this is already a judgment on the fact that they just tiny little things. But when you get comments all the time about, oh, you know, something about your hair because your hair looks so different, or never being called your name correctly because you look so different than what your name is, etc., etc. Microaggressions are tiring, and they are easy to grasp when once you open your eyes, or your ears. That's the ears, is it? Yeah, your ears. They are everywhere, and they have a lot to do with zombies. When I hear someone else I like very much, and I'm going to write the name as well in the chat, who's called Resmaa Menakem, who's an American psychologist who works on racial trauma and transgenerational trauma. Fabulous, fabulous work. He talks also about epigenetics and says that trauma is probably transmitted through 16 generations in epigenetics. Ooh, think about it, ×2. There's a lot of trauma out there, but also a lot of resources. We don't only get trauma, we also get resources. But he says microaggressions are in our body. They are in our cells, you know. And when he talks about something like unblackening, as a black male, when you get stopped by the police, what you do in your behavior is you unblacken so that you don't get any trouble. I find that terribly scary to hear that this is again zombie behavior, having to unblacken, which probably means just talking differently, adapting your language, adapting what you do with your hands, adapting the way you communicate as a form of learned zombiness. I am going to leave this out because that would open a lot of new pages. I just want to say that there's something you could do as a, if you're interested in looking into what we call relationship mapping, could be interested that after this conference, you take a piece of paper and maybe you can do this over a week. Start writing down everything you have a relationship to. And I'm saying everything because we don't only have relationships to human beings. We have relationships to time, to the bus driver who's driving my children to school, to the mushrooms I had in my plate yesterday, etc., etc. So start writing down and start looking into the mapping of your relationships. That is quite a fascinating exercise to do. In French, we have this saying that says l'humain et nature. Et can be written in two ways, so human and nature. If you write it in the first way, EST, it means the human is nature. If you lose the S and you just keep the ET as an A, it means human and nature. And I think one of the main problems we're having today is that we've lost this S. We have forgotten that we are part of nature. There's not us and nature. And a lot to be reconsidered in system thinking is to think beyond humanity and to think as human organisms or as systems more globally. I'm going to finish with the little Ich bin ich again, just because it inspired a little text that I wrote. So this is something very personal I'm sharing here, and I'll close with this. So a text I wrote a few years ago that says, I am me. I'm from the south, I'm from the north. I'm cold and I'm hot. I am the words and the unspoken. I'm brown and I'm white. I am close and so distant. I am noisy and silent. Sometimes oak, sometimes olive tree. I'm spicy and I'm shy. I'm sadness and the expression of sadness. I'm the one who judges and the one who's judged. I am roots, I am leaves, always a little bit the other, the good other, but other. I'm internal, I'm external, direct and indirect. My borders are Mediterranean. Hope, space, in-betweenness, compromise, choice, preferences, positioning. Do you prefer your father or your mother? Who am I? I'm redefining every day again. Beyond the polarities that are not mine, do not define me. I am you, you are me. I come from you, you come to me. We are continuity, we are limits. Am I allowed to think, feel, do so differently from you? Will I still be me? Or will I be less you? Will you accept my differences? Will you allow my distinctions? Will you still love me as much if I decide to be me? Can I be an acacia or a sunflower? Can I be purple or green? Sometimes hot, sometimes cold, sometimes so noisy and some silent, together or alone, inside and outside. I am me. I will stop here for today and thank you very, very much. And I'm sorry if I didn't leave enough time.
Thank you. Indeed, probably for an entire question plus the accompanying full-fledged answer, we might explode our time budget for today. Thank you so much. It breaks my heart that you can't be at the CETA Europa Congress, where probably each coffee break you would be stoned by people asking you more questions about this. If anyone can't let go of the question and they want to reach out to you, is there a way in which that is unintrusive to you and possible? Or do you say, nope, this is all you get?
No.
Which is fair enough.
Put my email. I put my email address on the PowerPoint. I'll put it here again. But you can also find me on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on. Don't go to Insta because I never look. I'm there, but I don't go there. So, yeah, I'm happy to answer. I'm happy to continue those conversations as well. Absolutely.
Thank you so
Definitely.
much. Thank you so much, Nadine. If you have a moment to look at the chat, it is a firework of gratitude right now. So thank you for this wonderful keynote presentation before the actual Congress actually happens. And yes, I am full of gratitude as well. And thank you so much. And let's stop the recording here. And thank you all that have participated, that have